Hello everyone and welcome to this grammar lesson on passive voice. Zaman majhul. As you remember, we talked about many active tenses before. We talked about all active tenses actually. Now it's time to talk about passive voice. What is passive voice? The passive voice is used in some cases and we use it in every language. We use it in our native languages, Qaderi, Pashto, Uzbeki, Hazaragi or any other local language of our country. زمان مجهول ما در زبانهای اصلی خودم استفاده میکنیم، در زبانهای محلی که ما داریم استفاده میکنیم. به طور مثال به دری ما میگیم یک نفر دیروز لط خورده بود. It's a passive voice. غذا ساعت 10 بجه پخته شده بود. It's a passive voice. موبایل ما دزدی شد یک هفته پیش. It's a passive voice. This kind of sentence are called passive voice. In English also, we can say our sentences in the active structure, we can say our sentences in the passive structure. Look at these examples. People study English. People study English. Who study English? People. Okay, so the subject is clear here. People do the action. People study. It's an active voice. But if I say English is studied, English khonda misha, it's a passive voice. We didn't mention who studies English. We just mention it. English is studied. English khonda misha. The subject is not clear. It's a passive voice. یک زمان مجهول است. Second sentence. She wrote a letter. She wrote a letter. It's an active tense. Who wrote the letter? She, the girl, the woman. She wrote the letter. The subject is clear. A letter was written. A letter was written. Who wrote the letter? We don't know. Not clear. So this is a passive voice. Noma nawishta shuda bud. Third sentence. They will finish the job. They will finish the job. Who will finish the job? They. The subject is clear. And if I say the job will be finished, who will finish the job? Not clear. Not mention it. This is the passive voice. کار وظیفه خود خلاص شوه. Not clear. Who is going to do the job? The fourth sentence. He has donated 1,000. 1,000 what? We can write here $1,000. So he has donated $1,000. Who has donated? The man, the boy, whoever is the guy, he has donated. The subject is clear. Subject مولومس او مرد کمک میکنه یا صدقه میده $1,000 $1,000 has been donated. $1,000 صدقه یا کمک یا داده میشه. So who gives this money? In the passive voice, not clear. In the active voice, clear. These are some of the sentences in active and passive. Hope you understood this part. When is the passive voice used? Okay, in the language there are specific cases that we use passive voice. We need to understand in which cases should we use the passive voice and in which cases should we use the active voice. As we studied about the active voice, in every structure of the active voice, we have the subject of the sentence in the beginning and the subject is important in the active voice. But in the passive voice, opposite of that, the object is more important and the subject is not important. We use the passive voice. So let's come to some of the cases that we use the passive voice. The first case, as we use the passive voice, the subject is unknown. The subject is not clear. If the subject, the doer of the action, which action, such as study, write, steal, watch, clean, wash, these kind of verbs, if the doer of these actions is unknown, if the doer is not clear, we use the passive voice. Look at this example. The phone was stolen. In this sentence, the subject is not clear. So if I knew who was the thief, who was the robber, then of course I would go to him and I would take back my phone. But I don't know. The subject, the doer of, it means the robber, the thief is not clear. So in this case, when the subject is unknown, when the subject is not clear in an action, we have to use the passive voice. Hope it's done. The next part. In the next case, the subject is expected to be hidden. In some of the situations, when our friends, our siblings, our relatives, classmates, when they do something wrong and we wish to hide the subject, if someone comes to us and asks us who has done this action, then we are expected to hide the subject. Then in this case, we can use the passive voice. So the window is broken. So we need to give the report to someone, but we don't want to mention the subject, right? The subject is expected to be hidden. In the class you're sitting and a friend of you, a classmate of yours break a window, a glass, and the teacher come and you need to give the report. You go to the principal and you say, you can say the window is broken. So it means you don't want to mention the subject. The subject is expected to be hidden, but you need to give the report. The window is broken. Who has broken? We don't want to mention it. We are expected to hide the subject. Hope it's clear. The next part, the subject is not important. In some cases, actually, who has done the action, the doer of the action is not important. It's not important who has done it, but the action is more important. Is the action done or no? In this case also we have to use the passive voice, such as this example, the board is cleaned. Now, who cleaned the board? Not important. I don't care who cleaned the board, but my point is the board cleaned or not? So in this case also we use the passive voice. The fourth sentence, the action is more important. So in this case also we use the passive voice when the action is more important rather than the subject or anything else in the sentence. The documents are sent. The documents are sent. So I don't care who sent the documents, but my point is, are the documents sent or no? It's also the case of the passive voice that we use in English language. Hope you understood this part. All right. How to structure passive voice? چطور ساختار passive voice جور کنیم؟ How to make the passive sentence structure. Remember, in every passive voice structure, in every tense in the passive voice, we need the verb be. It means to be verbs. Now, the verb be can have different forms, and the verb be is used in different tenses. The verb be can be is, am, are. When the verb be is, am, are, we use it in the present tense. And the verb be could be was and were. And the verb be, was and were is used in the past. And the passive voice of simple past tense, the verb be is, was and were, and we used always to make it to the passive voice. In the continuous tenses, the be changes to being, such as present continuous, past continuous, future continuous. The auxiliary being is used in the continuous tenses. And the perfect tense. In the perfect tense, we use been. Been is used in the passive voice as a form of be. It means it is the third form of be, and we use it in the passive voice. In which tenses? Perfect tenses. And also when we use the be in different tenses, be in the present, be in the past, be in the continuous tenses, be in the perfect tenses, plus past participle. What is the meaning of past participle? Past participle, it means verb 3, the third form of the verb, such as eat, ate, eaten. So our verb 3, eaten. In every passive voice sentence structure, the verb 3 is used, the past participle form of the verb is used. Remember, Be plus past participle. It means to be verb is am or was and were, being, been in different tenses plus past participle. Hope it's clear. Transitive and transitive verbs. Okay, there is one thing more about the forms of the verb, as we can change them to the passive voice. In some cases, some of the sentences cannot be changed to the passive voice, and it's about the verbs of those sentences. So let's come to it and let's understand which sentences cannot be changed to the passive voice. There are two types of verbs. We have transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. What is a transitive verb and what is an intransitive verb? So, transitive verbs can have an object. It's about the object. Transitive, intransitive is in case of object. If a verb can have an object, we call it transitive verb. If a verb cannot have an object, we call it intransitive verb. Intransitive verbs can't have an object. Remember this case. The transitive and intransitive case is about the object. If the verb can have object, transitive. If the verb cannot have object, intransitive. So let's come to some of the verbs. Let's see about these verbs. We say arrest, steady, save, complete, sell, boy, build. These verbs are all transitive because when we use them in the sentences, they can have an object. Such as if I say arrest, the police arrested. The police arrested the robber. Police dasgir kad, kira dasgir kad, the robber. So the verb has an object. Fail yag object dora, girinde amal dora. That's why we call it transitive verb. All these verbs, they can have the object. If I say study, ma mekhonam mutali'a mekunam, chira mutali'a mekunam, there is something I study. There is an object. So that's why it is called a transitive verb. Save. What do I save? I save money. I save my life. I save my business. I save. What do I save? There is something I save. So whatever is that thing which I save, that's called the object. So that this verb can have an object. That's why it is transitive verb. Complete. So there is something which I complete, you complete, he completes, she completes, Ahmad complete. So whatever is that thing, so that's the object. And that's why we call this verb a transitive, because it can have an object. The same, the other verbs, they all can have objects, and that's the reason we call them transitive verbs. Hope to be clear. Come to the next examples about intransitive verbs. Go, it's an intransitive verb. It cannot have an object. Come, it cannot have an object. Cry, it cannot have an object. Scream, it cannot have an object. Arrive, it cannot have an object. Live, smile. These verbs cannot have object in the sentences. Such as the example, I arrived late last night. So this verb doesn't have any object. So that's why we call it passive voice. In this sentence, I arrived late is an adverb of time. Last night is also an adverb of time. So there is no object. So the verb cannot have an object. That's why it's an intransitive verb. All these verbs, as you can see them, go, come, cry, scream, arrive, live, smile, fly. These verbs cannot have the object, and we call them intransitive verbs. All right. Hope you to understood the transitive and intransitive words and verbs, and hope it's clear. All right. So let's come to some of the examples of active and passive to understand them better in the sentences. All right. The first sentence, I teach English for my students. Firstly, the verb teach, it's a transitive verb, and that's why it can be changed to the passive voice. I teach English for my students. What do I teach? English. This is the object. Now, in the passive voice, English comes in the beginning. English is taught for my students. This is the passive voice. ما با شاگردایم انگلیسی درس میتم. انگلیسی به شاگردایم درس داده میشه. زمان معلوم، زمان مجهول. Second sentence. Sun melted the ice in winter. Sun melted what? The ice. The ice is the object. Now, in the passive voice, the ice comes in the beginning. The ice was melted in winter. Active tense, passive tense. آفتاب یخ آب کرده بود در زمستان. یخ در زمستان آب شده بود. زمان معلوم، زمان مجهول. Third sentence. He has turned the TV on. He has turned on something. What has he turned on? He has turned the TV. The TV. TV is the object. Active. Now, in the passive, the TV has been turned on. Passive. Active. Passive. او پسر تلویزیون روشن کرد. تلویزیون روشن شده بود. So, زمان معلوم، زمان مجهول. Fourth sentence. I'm driving the car now. I'm driving the car now. It's present, continuous, and I am driving. What am I driving? The car. The car is the object. Active. In the passive, the car is being driven now. So, passive. Active, passive. ما رانندگی میکنم موتر رانندگی میشه. زمان معلوم، زمان مجهول. Hope it's clear. Come to the next part. There is something else. In some cases, we mention the subject, and when we mention the subject, in English grammar, we call it agent. To mention the agent, we use the word by. To mention this, the agent in passive voice, the word by is used. If you want, you can mention the subject, not a big deal. If you're interested, at the end of your passive voice sentence structure, by using the word by, the subject can be mentioned. Let's come to this example. This example says, he will change the schedule next week. It's simple future. He will change something. Change what? The schedule. The schedule is the object. Now, to change it into passive, we say the schedule will be changed, and we mention the agent by him. Him is the agent, the subject, and we can mention it by the word by him next week. Active, passive. او پسر اسکیجول خود تغییر بده هفته بعدی. زمان معلوم. The schedule will be changed by him next week. اسکیجول خواهد تغییر بخوره. توسط کی؟ توسط زمان پسر هفته بعدی. زمان مجهول. Alright. Now, we are coming to an end, and this was the first session, the first lesson on passive voice. Of course, it was only an introduction of passive voice. There are many structures regarding to different tenses, and we will talk about those sentence structures in the next sessions, inshallah. And remember one thing. When you want to learn English, when you're studying English and you're learning English, you need somewhere to practice your English. And I can tell you, Afghanistan English Campus could be the best place that you can practice your English. Why? Because we have the best environment, professional teachers, the best lesson plans to help you practice your English in this amazing environment. Thank you so much. Wish you all the best.